Let me ask you something. Have you ever wondered why some people seem to effortlessly command respect in any room they enter? Why certain individuals can influence others without saying much, while others struggle to get their point across even when they're right? Why some people build incredible relationships and networks that propel them forward, while others remain stuck and overlooked despite having all the technical skills in the world? The answer isn't intelligence. It isn't talent. It isn't even hard work. The answer is emotional intelligence and social skills. And here's the brutal truth that 99% of people refuse to accept. Your success in life will not be determined by how smart you are, but by how well you understand and manage emotions, both your own and others. Most people are walking around completely blind to the emotional undercurrents that control every interaction, every decision, every opportunity. They're reactive instead of strategic. They're awkward instead of magnetic. They're forgettable instead of influential. And they wonder why they keep hitting invisible barriers in their career and relationships. But not you. Today, you're going to learn the exact system that separates the emotionally intelligent from the emotionally clueless. You're going to discover how to read people like an open book, influence without manipulation, and build relationships that become your greatest asset. This isn't theory. This is a practical blueprint for social mastery. Chapter 1. The Hidden Cost of Emotional Blindness. Before we dive into how to master emotional intelligence, you need to understand exactly what it's costing you to remain emotionally blind, because most people have no idea how much their lack of emotional awareness is sabotaging their life every single day. Let's start with your career. You might think that promotions go to the smartest person in the room, but research shows that 90% of top performers have high emotional intelligence. Meanwhile, people with average IQs but high emotional intelligence earn $29,000 more per year than those with high IQs but low emotional intelligence. Think about that. Your inability to read emotions, manage relationships, and influence others is literally costing you tens of thousands of dollars every year. But it goes deeper than money. Every time you misread someone's emotional state, you're missing critical information. When you fail to regulate your own emotions under pressure, you're making decisions from a place of reaction rather than strategy. When you can't build rapport with colleagues, clients, or superiors, you're cutting yourself off from opportunities that others with better social skills will capture. I've seen brilliant engineers passed over for leadership roles because they couldn't connect with their teams. I've watched talented salespeople struggle because they couldn't read their prospects' emotional needs. I've seen entrepreneurs with game-changing ideas fail because they couldn't persuade investors or inspire employees. The common thread? They all underestimated the power of emotional intelligence. Now, let's talk about your relationships. Whether it's romantic partnerships, friendships, or family dynamics, emotional intelligence is the foundation of every meaningful connection. People with low emotional intelligence struggle with intimacy because they can't understand or validate their partner's emotions. They have surface-level friendships because they can't create deep emotional bonds. They experience more conflict because they react emotionally instead of responding strategically. Here's what happens when you lack emotional intelligence in relationships. You miss the subtle cues that tell you when someone is upset, frustrated, or withdrawing. You say the wrong thing at the wrong time because you can't read the emotional temperature of the room. You escalate conflicts instead of resolving them because you're driven by your own emotions rather than understanding the other person's perspective. You come across as self-centered or insensitive, even when that's not your intention. The cost compounds over time. Broken relationships, missed connections, isolation, a reputation as someone who's difficult to work with or be around. And the worst part, you often don't even realize why these things are happening because you're operating with emotional blind spots. But here's the good news. Emotional intelligence isn't fixed. It's not something you're born with or without. It's a learnable skill set. Every component of emotional intelligence can be developed through deliberate practice and the right strategies. Self-awareness can be trained. Emotional regulation can be mastered. Empathy can be cultivated. Social skills can be systematically improved. The people who seem naturally charismatic and influential, they've either consciously or unconsciously developed these skills through years of experience. But you don't have years. You need to accelerate this process. You need a system that allows you to develop emotional intelligence rapidly and systematically. That's exactly what you're going to get over the next several chapters. I'm going to break down emotional intelligence into its core components and give you practical strategies for mastering each one. You're going to learn how to read people like an open book, influence without manipulation, and build relationships that become your greatest asset. This isn't theory. This is a practical blueprint for social mastery. Chapter 2. The 5 Pillars of Emotional Mastery. Emotional intelligence isn't some vague concept that you either have or you don't. It's a specific set of skills that can be broken down into 5 distinct pillars. Master these 5 pillars and you'll have more influence and impact than 99% of the population. Ignore them and you'll remain stuck in mediocrity no matter how technically skilled you become. The first pillar is self-awareness. This is your ability to recognize and understand your own emotions in real time. Most people are completely unconscious of their emotional states. They're angry, but don't realize they're angry until they've already said something they regret. They're anxious, but mistake it for excitement. They're frustrated, but can't pinpoint why. Self-awareness means developing an internal radar that constantly monitors your emotional temperature. It's knowing that when your jaw tightens and your breathing becomes shallow, you're moving into stress mode. It's recognizing that when you start speaking faster and interrupting others, you're becoming defensive. It's understanding that when you feel that sinking sensation in your stomach, you're experiencing fear or anxiety. But self-awareness goes beyond just identifying emotions. It's understanding your emotional triggers, your patterns, your default responses. Maybe you always get defensive when someone questions your expertise. Maybe you shut down emotionally when facing criticism. Maybe you become overly aggressive when you feel threatened. Self-aware people know these patterns and can catch themselves before they sabotage important interactions. Here's how to develop self-awareness rapidly. First, implement emotional check-ins throughout your day. Set alarms on your phone for every 2 hours. When it goes off, pause and ask yourself, what am I feeling right now? What's my energy level? What's my emotional state? Don't judge it, just observe it. This trains your brain to become more conscious of your internal experience. Second, start tracking your emotional triggers. Keep a journal and note every time you have a strong emotional reaction, what happened right before, who was involved, what thoughts were going through your mind. Over time, you'll start to see patterns. You'll realize that you always get angry when people don't follow through on commitments, or that you become anxious when you're unprepared for meetings. Third, pay attention to your physical sensations. Emotions show up in your body before they show up in your conscious awareness. Tension in your shoulders might indicate stress. A tight chest might signal anxiety. A clenched jaw might reveal anger. Your body is constantly giving you emotional intelligence data if you learn to listen to it. The second pillar is self-regulation. This is your ability to manage your emotions rather than being controlled by them. Self-regulation doesn't mean suppressing emotions or pretending they don't exist. It means choosing how to respond to your emotions rather than reacting automatically. People with poor self-regulation are at the mercy of their emotional states. When they're angry, they lash out. When they're anxious, they avoid important conversations. When they're excited, they make impulsive decisions. They're like emotional ping-pong balls, bouncing from one reaction to another without any conscious control. People with strong self-regulation feel their emotions fully, but they choose their response strategically. They can be angry, but still communicate calmly. They can be nervous, but still take bold action. They can be disappointed, but still maintain their composure and professionalism. The key to self-regulation is the pause between stimulus and response. There's a space. In that space lies your freedom to choose your response. Most people collapse that space and react instantly. Emotionally intelligent people expand that space and respond thoughtfully. Here's a practical technique for developing self-regulation. When you feel a strong emotion arising, use the acronym STOP. S means stop what you're doing. T means take a breath. O means observe what you're feeling. P means proceed with intention. This 4-step process takes less than 10 seconds, but can prevent you from saying or doing something that damages your relationships or reputation. Another powerful self-regulation strategy is reframing. Instead of seeing challenging emotions as problems to be eliminated, see them as information to be processed. Anger might be telling you that a boundary has been crossed. Anxiety might be alerting you to prepare more thoroughly. Disappointment might be showing you that your expectations need adjustment. When you reframe emotions as data rather than directives, you maintain more control over your responses. The third pillar is motivation. This isn't external motivation, like money or recognition, though those can be important. This is intrinsic motivation, driven by your values, your sense of purpose, and your commitment to growth. Emotionally intelligent people are motivated by internal factors that sustain them through challenges and setbacks. Emotionally intelligent people have a clear sense of what matters to them. They know their core values and make decisions based on those values rather than just chasing external rewards. They're motivated by the desire to grow, to contribute, to make a difference. This internal motivation makes them more resilient when facing obstacles and more persistent when pursuing long-term goals. They also have what psychologists call a growth mindset. They see challenges as opportunities to learn rather than threats to avoid. They view failures as feedback rather than final judgments. They believe that abilities can be developed through effort and practice rather than being fixed traits. To develop stronger intrinsic motivation, start by clarifying your values. What principles do you want to guide your decisions? What kind of person do you want to become? What impact do you want to have on others? When your actions align with your values, you'll find sustainable motivation that doesn't depend on external circumstances. The fourth pillar is empathy. This is your ability to understand and share the emotions of others. Empathy allows you to connect with people on an emotional level, to see situations from their perspective, to respond to their needs rather than just your own agenda. Most people think they're empathetic, but they're actually projecting. They assume others feel the same way they would in a similar situation. True empathy requires setting aside your own emotional experience and genuinely trying to understand someone else's internal world. Empathetic people are masters at reading emotional cues. They notice when someone's smile doesn't reach their eyes. They pick up on the slight change in vocal tone that indicates frustration. They see the micro-expression that flashes across someone's face before they compose themselves. They're like emotional detectives, constantly gathering data about how others are feeling. But empathy goes beyond just reading emotions. It's also about responding appropriately to what you observe. Sometimes empathy means offering comfort and support. Sometimes it means giving someone space. Sometimes it means challenging someone in a caring way. The key is responding to what the other person needs, not what you think they should need. The fifth pillar is social skills. This is where all the other pillars come together into practical application. Social skills are your ability to use your emotional intelligence to build relationships, influence others, resolve conflicts, and create positive outcomes in social situations. People with strong social skills know how to adapt their communication style to different personalities and contexts. They can be direct with someone who appreciates straightforward communication and more diplomatic with someone who needs a softer approach. They know when to speak and when to listen, when to push and when to pull back, when to be vulnerable and when to be strong. Social skills also include the ability to manage group dynamics. Socially skilled people can read the emotional temperature of a room and adjust accordingly. They can facilitate productive discussions, diffuse tensions, and bring out the best in others. They're often the ones who get chosen for leadership roles, not because they're the smartest, but because others trust them to manage relationships and navigate complex social situations. These 5 pillars work together synergistically. Self-awareness provides the foundation for self-regulation. Self-regulation creates space for empathy. Empathy informs your social skills. Intrinsic motivation drives you to develop all of these abilities consistently over time. Chapter 3. Reading people like a human lie detector. One of the most valuable skills you can develop is the ability to accurately read other people's emotions, intentions, and mental states. While most people stumble through social interactions missing critical emotional information, masters of emotional intelligence can decode human behavior like reading a book written in a familiar language. This isn't about manipulation or using people, it's about understanding them so deeply that you can respond in ways that create mutual benefit and genuine connection. When you truly understand what someone is feeling and why they're feeling it, you can communicate in ways that resonate with them, solve problems they actually care about, and build relationships based on real understanding rather than surface-level pleasantries. The foundation of reading people accurately is understanding that all human behavior is communication. Every gesture, Every facial expression, every vocal inflection is broadcasting information about someone's internal state. Most people miss this information because they're too focused on what they want to say next, or they're making assumptions based on their own perspective rather than observing what's actually happening. Let's start with facial expressions. Your face has over 40 muscles, and different combinations of these muscles create distinct emotional signatures. When someone is genuinely happy, their entire face lights up. The corners of their eyes crinkle, their cheeks lift, their smile engages their whole face. But when someone is giving you a fake smile, only their mouth moves. Their eyes remain unchanged, sometimes even slightly narrowed. Fear shows up as widened eyes, raised eyebrows, and often a slightly open mouth. Anger creates a furrowed brow, narrowed eyes, and pressed lips. Disgust involves a wrinkled nose and raised upper lip. Surprise widens the eyes and drops the jaw. Sadness droops the corners of the mouth and eyes. These are universal expressions that transcend culture and language. But here's where it gets interesting. Most emotional expressions only last for a fraction of a second before people consciously control their face. These micro-expressions leak through before someone can compose themselves. If you learn to catch these brief flashes, you can see what someone is really feeling before they decide what expression they want to show you. To develop this skill, practice what I call the facial scanning technique. When you're talking with someone, instead of just making general eye contact, let your awareness include their entire face. Notice the area around their eyes, the tension in their forehead, the position of their mouth. Don't stare intensely, just expand your peripheral awareness to include more visual information. Body language provides even richer information than facial expressions. Someone's posture tells you about their confidence level, their energy, their engagement with the conversation. When someone is confident and engaged, they'll generally have an upright posture, their shoulders back, their body oriented toward you. When they're insecure or disinterested, they might hunch their shoulders, cross their arms, or angle their body away from you. Watch for changes in body language during your conversation. If someone starts the interaction with open, relaxed posture, but gradually closes off by crossing their arms or stepping back, you've hit on something that makes them uncomfortable. If they lean forward and their gestures become more animated, you've engaged their interest. Hand gestures reveal tremendous amounts of information. When people are nervous or uncomfortable, their hand movements often become more restricted and controlled. They might clasp their hands together, put them in their pockets, or hold on to something like a coffee cup or pen. When they're excited or passionate, their gestures become more expansive and animated. Pay attention to what people do with their hands when they're thinking or processing information. Some people touch their face, others fidget with objects, others gesture abstractly. These patterns are usually consistent for each individual, so once you learn someone's thinking patterns, you can tell when they're processing something complex or feeling uncertain about what you said. Vocal patterns provide another layer of emotional intelligence data. It's not just what people say, but how they say it. Voice carries emotion in ways that words alone cannot convey. When someone is nervous, their voice might become higher in pitch, faster in tempo, or shakier in tone. When they're confident, their voice tends to be lower, slower, and more resonant. Listen for changes in vocal patterns during your conversations. If someone's voice becomes more strained when discussing a particular topic, they might be feeling stressed or defensive about that subject. If their voice becomes more animated and energetic, they're probably genuinely interested in what you're discussing. Volume changes also carry meaning. When people lower their voice, they might be sharing something they consider confidential or intimate. When they raise their voice, they might be trying to emphasize a point, or they might be becoming frustrated. The speed of speech reveals mental and emotional states. Rapid speech often indicates excitement, anxiety, or the feeling that there's limited time to communicate something important. Very slow speech might indicate careful thought, fatigue, or sometimes condescension. Sudden changes in speech patterns are particularly meaningful because they suggest a shift in emotional state. But here's the crucial point about reading people. You must calibrate your observations to each individual. People have different baseline behaviors. Some people are naturally more animated while others are more reserved. Some people speak quickly as their normal pattern, while others are naturally slow speakers. The key is noticing deviations from their personal baseline rather than comparing everyone to a general standard. Context is everything when reading people. The same behavior might mean completely different things in different situations. Someone crossing their arms might indicate defensiveness in a confrontational conversation, but it might just mean they're cold in an air-conditioned room. Someone avoiding eye contact might indicate deception in some contexts, but it might indicate respect or shyness in others. This is why the most emotionally intelligent people are excellent at asking clarifying questions rather than just making assumptions based on their observations. If you notice someone's body language becoming more closed off, instead of assuming they're upset with you, you might ask, "How are you feeling about what we've discussed so far?" This gives them an opportunity to clarify their internal state rather than leaving you to guess. Chapter 4. The Art of Emotional Regulation Under Pressure. The difference between someone who thrives under pressure and someone who crumbles isn't talent or intelligence, it's emotional regulation. The ability to maintain clarity, composure, and strategic thinking when emotions are running high is perhaps the most valuable skill you can develop for both professional success and personal relationships. Most people become less effective when stakes are high and pressure mounts. They make impulsive decisions when they're angry. They avoid difficult conversations when they're anxious. They shut down when they're overwhelmed. They react emotionally rather than responding strategically. This creates a downward spiral where pressure leads to poor emotional management, which leads to worse outcomes, which creates more pressure. But there's a small percentage of people who actually become more focused and effective under pressure. They're the ones who get promoted during crises. They're the ones others turn to when situations become difficult. They're the ones who build reputations as reliable, steady, and trustworthy. They've mastered the art of emotional regulation. Emotional regulation doesn't mean becoming emotionally numb or suppressing all feelings. Emotions contain valuable information and energy that can be channeled productively. The key is learning to feel emotions fully while choosing your response consciously rather than reacting automatically. The first step in emotional regulation is recognizing your early warning signals. Every person has physical and mental cues that indicate their emotional state is shifting. Maybe your shoulders tense when you start to feel stressed. Maybe your breathing becomes shallow when you're getting anxious. Maybe your jaw clenches when you're becoming angry. Maybe your thoughts start racing when you're feeling overwhelmed. These early warning signals are your opportunity to intervene before your emotions take control of your behavior. Once you're in full emotional reaction mode, regulation becomes much more difficult. But when you catch emotions in their early stages, you can guide them rather than being guided by them. Here's a powerful technique for managing emotional intensity in real time. It's called the physiological reset, and it works by activating your parasympathetic nervous system to counteract the fight or flight response that accompanies strong emotions. When you notice your early warning signals, immediately focus on your breathing. Take a slow, deep breath in through your nose for 4 counts, hold it for 4 counts, then exhale slowly through your mouth for 6 counts. The longer exhale activates the parasympathetic nervous system and signals your brain that you're safe. Repeat this 3 to 5 times until you feel your nervous system settling. Next, consciously relax your muscles. Starting from the top of your head and working down, release the tension in your forehead, your jaw, your shoulders, your arms, your chest, your abdomen, your legs. This prevents the physical tension that accompanies strong emotions from reinforcing the emotional intensity. Finally, ground yourself in the present moment by engaging your senses. Notice 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can physically feel, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste. This breaks the cycle of anxious or angry thoughts and brings your awareness back to reality, rather than the story your mind is creating about the situation. Another crucial skill for emotional regulation is cognitive reframing. This involves consciously choosing how to interpret situations rather than accepting your initial emotional reaction as the only truth. Your emotional response to any situation is based on the meaning you assign to what's happening, not the objective facts of what's happening. For example, if someone criticizes your work, your initial emotional response might be anger or defensiveness, but you could reframe this situation in multiple ways. Maybe they're trying to help you improve. Maybe they're having a bad day and it's not really about you. Maybe they have a different perspective that could be valuable. Maybe this is an opportunity to demonstrate how well you handle feedback. None of these reframes require you to pretend the criticism didn't happen or that you don't care about it. They simply give you options for how to respond rather than being locked into one emotional reaction. The most emotionally regulated people have developed the habit of asking themselves, what's another way I could interpret this situation that would be more useful? Preparation is another key component of emotional regulation. If you know you're going into a potentially emotionally charged situation, you can prepare yourself mentally and emotionally rather than just hoping for the best. Before important conversations, negotiations, or presentations, take time to anticipate potential emotional triggers and plan your responses. What might the other person say that could make you defensive? How will you handle it if they reject your proposal? What will you do if they become angry or emotional? Having a plan for these scenarios prevents you from being caught off guard and reacting impulsively. You can also use visualization to rehearse maintaining composure under pressure. Mentally walk through challenging scenarios while practicing the breathing techniques and cognitive reframes you want to use. This creates neural pathways that make it easier to access these skills when you actually need them. The most advanced level of emotional regulation involves what psychologists call emotional granularity. This means developing a sophisticated vocabulary for describing your emotional states rather than just defaulting to broad categories like good or bad, happy or sad. When you can precisely identify what you're feeling, you can respond more appropriately. There's a big difference between feeling disappointed and feeling betrayed. Even though both might initially register as bad feelings, disappointment might call for adjusting expectations, while betrayal might require setting boundaries or having a direct conversation. Similarly, there's a difference between feeling nervous and feeling excited, even though they produce similar physical sensations.
Nervousness might call for more preparation or support, while excitement might call for channeling that energy into peak performance. The more precisely you can identify your emotions, the more precisely you can choose your response. This level of emotional sophistication is rare, which is why people who develop it have such a significant advantage in both professional and personal situations. Chapter 5. Building unshakable confidence through social mastery. Confidence isn't something you're born with or without. It's not a personality trait that some people have and others lack. Confidence is a skill that develops through competence. And social confidence specifically develops through mastering social situations systematically rather than hoping you'll naturally become more comfortable over time. Most people approach social interactions with a scarcity mindset. They worry about saying the wrong thing, making a bad impression, or being rejected. This anxiety becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy because anxiety makes you less attractive, less engaging, and more likely to have negative social experiences, which reinforces the anxiety. Truly confident people approach social interactions with an abundance mindset. They're genuinely curious about other people. They're focused on what they can give to the interaction rather than what they can get from it. They're comfortable with themselves, which makes others comfortable around them. But here's what most people don't understand about social confidence. It's built through specific skills, not through generic positive thinking or motivation. When you master the mechanics of social interaction, confidence becomes a natural byproduct rather than something you have to force. The foundation of social confidence is what I call authentic self-presentation. This means knowing who you are, what you stand for, and what you bring to any interaction. Most people are so focused on trying to be what they think others want them to be that they never develop a strong sense of their authentic self. Authentic self-presentation requires clarity about your values, your strengths, your interests, and your perspectives. When you're clear about these things, you don't have to pretend to be someone else or try to figure out what mask to wear in different situations.
You can show up as yourself consistently, which creates a sense of stability and trustworthiness that others find attractive. This doesn't mean being inflexible or refusing to adapt to different social contexts. It means having a strong core identity that remains consistent while your expression of that identity adapts appropriately to different situations. A confident person might be more formal in a business meeting and more casual at a social gathering, but their core values and personality remain the same. To develop authentic self-presentation, spend time clarifying your personal brand. What 3 qualities do you want people to associate with you? What unique perspective do you bring to conversations? What value do you offer in relationships and professional interactions? When you're clear about these things, you can present yourself consistently rather than trying to be a different person in every situation. The second component of social confidence is conversational competence. Most people struggle in social situations because they don't know how to create and maintain engaging conversations. They default to small talk about the weather or recent events, which rarely creates meaningful connection or memorable interactions. Confident conversationalists know how to ask questions that open up interesting discussions. Instead of asking, "How are you?" which typically gets a generic response, they might ask, "What's been the highlight of your week?" or "What project are you most excited about right now?" These questions invite more thoughtful and revealing responses. They also know how to build on what others share, rather than just waiting for their turn to talk. If someone mentions they had a challenging week, a skilled conversationalist might ask what made it challenging, how they handled it, or what they learned from the experience. This shows genuine interest and helps the conversation develop depth. Master conversationalists also know how to share about themselves in ways that invite connection rather than dominating the conversation. They use what's called the disclosure reciprocity principle, where they share something about themselves at a similar level of depth to what the other person has shared. This creates a balanced exchange where both people feel heard and understood. Another crucial skill for social confidence is managing social anxiety in real time. Even confident people sometimes feel nervous in social situations, especially when the stakes are high or they're meeting new people. The difference is they have techniques for managing that anxiety rather than being controlled by it. One effective technique is called the externalization of focus. Instead of focusing on your internal experience, how you're feeling, whether you're saying the right things, what others might be thinking about you, focus externally on the other person. Become genuinely curious about their experience, their perspective, their story. When you're focused on understanding and connecting with others, you naturally become more engaging because people can sense that you're genuinely interested in them. This also breaks the cycle of self-focused anxiety that makes social interactions feel stressful. Another powerful technique is what I call social contribution framing. Instead of approaching social interactions wondering what you can get from them, approval, connection, opportunities, approach them wondering what you can contribute. How can you make others feel more comfortable? How can you add value to the conversation? How can you make the interaction more enjoyable for everyone involved? This shift in perspective naturally reduces anxiety and increases confidence because you're focused on giving rather than getting. Physical presence is another key component of social confidence. Your posture, your gestures, your vocal tone all communicate confidence or lack of confidence before you even say your first word. Confident people take up appropriate space. They stand tall with their shoulders back. They make appropriate eye contact. They speak with a clear, resonant voice. But physical confidence isn't about adopting an aggressive or dominating presence. It's about presenting yourself as someone who belongs in the space and has valuable contributions to make. It's a relaxed alertness that shows you're engaged and present without being anxious or aggressive.
Practice what's called embodied confidence by regularly checking in with your physical presentation. Are your shoulders relaxed but upright? Is your breathing deep and steady? Are you making appropriate eye contact without staring? Are you speaking at a pace and volume that shows confidence without being overwhelming? The most advanced level of social confidence comes from developing what I call social leadership. This means taking responsibility for the quality of social interactions rather than just hoping they go well. Social leaders set the emotional tone, guide conversations toward productive directions, and help everyone involved have a better experience. Social leadership isn't about dominating conversations or always being the center of attention. It's about creating an environment where good conversations can happen. Sometimes this means asking great questions. Sometimes it means facilitating connections between others. Sometimes it means gracefully changing subjects when conversations stagnate. When you develop social leadership skills, you never have to worry about awkward silence or boring conversations because you take responsibility for creating engaging interactions. This level of social competence creates unshakable confidence because you know you can handle any social situation effectively. Chapter 6: The Science of Influence Without Manipulation. There's a massive difference between influence and manipulation, and understanding this distinction will determine whether you build lasting relationships or burn bridges while climbing the ladder. Manipulation seeks to benefit you at the expense of others. Influence seeks to create outcomes that benefit everyone involved. The most successful people in any field have mastered ethical influence, and it's a skill that can be learned systematically. The foundation of ethical influence is understanding human psychology and decision-making patterns. People don't make decisions based purely on logic. They make decisions based on emotions and then justify those decisions with logic. If you want to influence someone, you need to connect with their emotional drivers while providing logical support for the decision you want them to make. But here's what 99% of people get wrong about influence. They focus on what they want the other person to do instead of understanding what the other person actually wants. They try to convince people to buy their product, support their idea, or follow their lead without first understanding what would motivate that person to take action. Master influencers start by understanding the other person's values, motivations, fears, and desires. They ask themselves, what does this person really care about? What problems are they trying to solve? What outcomes would make their life better? Only after they understand these deeper motivations do they craft their message. Let's talk about the 6 universal principles of influence that have been proven through decades of psychological research. The first principle is reciprocity. People feel obligated to return favors and gestures of goodwill, but most people use this principle crudely by giving something small and immediately asking for something big in return. That's not influence, that's manipulation. Ethical influencers use reciprocity by genuinely adding value to others' lives before they need anything in return. They share useful information, make helpful introductions, offer assistance during challenging times, or provide resources that solve real problems. They build a bank of goodwill over time rather than trying to make immediate withdrawals. The key to using reciprocity ethically is ensuring that what you give is genuinely valuable to the other person, not just what you think should be valuable. Maybe they need industry insights. Maybe they need emotional support. Maybe they need connections to specific people. The more you understand their actual needs, the more effectively you can provide genuine value. The second principle is commitment and consistency. People have a deep psychological need to be consistent with their previous commitments and statements. If someone says they value innovation, they'll be more likely to support an innovative idea. If someone commits to a goal publicly, they'll be more motivated to achieve it. Skilled influencers use this principle by getting people to verbally commit to values and principles that align with the action you want them to take. They might ask questions like, how important is professional development to you? Or what role does teamwork play in your success? When people articulate these values out loud, they become more committed to acting consistently with them. You can also use commitment and consistency by helping people connect their identity to the behavior you want to encourage. Instead of asking someone to try something, ask them to be something. Instead of, would you try to arrive on time? Ask, are you someone who values punctuality? People will act consistently with how they see themselves. The third principle is social proof.
People look to others, especially others they respect or identify with, to guide their own behavior. If someone sees that people like them have already embraced an idea or taken an action, they're much more likely to do the same. The most effective way to use social proof is through specific stories and examples rather than vague statistics. Instead of saying many successful people do this, tell the story of a specific successful person who took this action and achieved the results your audience wants. Make the example as similar as possible to your audience in terms of background, challenges, or goals. You can also create social proof by facilitating connections between the person you want to influence and others who have already made the decision you're advocating. Sometimes a 5-minute conversation with someone who's already implemented your recommendation will be more influential than hours of your own persuasion. The fourth principle is authority. People are influenced by those they perceive as credible experts in relevant fields. But authority isn't just about titles or credentials. It's about demonstrated expertise, proven results, and the ability to provide valuable insights that others cannot. You build authority not by telling people how smart you are, but by consistently providing valuable perspectives and accurate predictions. You build authority by helping people solve problems they couldn't solve on their own. You build authority by being right about things that matter to them. The key to ethical authority is ensuring that your influence is based on genuine expertise rather than false credentials. If you don't have expertise in a particular area, acknowledge that limitation and refer people to someone who does. This actually enhances your authority because it shows you're honest about your limitations. The fifth principle is liking. People are more easily influenced by people they like, and people tend to like others who are similar to them, who compliment them genuinely,
and who show interest in them as individuals. But this doesn't mean you should fake similarity or give insincere compliments. The most effective way to use liking is to find genuine common ground with others. Maybe you share similar professional challenges, similar values, similar interests outside of work, or similar communication styles. When you identify these authentic similarities, emphasize them naturally. In your interactions, you also increase liking by showing genuine interest in others. Ask questions about their perspectives, their experiences, their goals. Listen actively to their responses and ask follow-up questions that show you're truly engaged. People like others who make them feel heard and understood. The sixth principle is scarcity. People value things more highly when they perceive them as rare or limited. But this principle is often misused by creating artificial urgency or false scarcity. Ethical influence uses real scarcity based on genuine constraints. Maybe your time really is limited, and you can only work with a certain number of clients. Maybe there really are a limited number of positions available. Maybe a particular opportunity really does have a deadline. When scarcity is real, it's appropriate to communicate it clearly so people can make informed decisions. The key to ethical influence is combining these principles in ways that create genuine value for everyone involved. You're not trying to trick people into doing something that's bad for them. You're helping them recognize how taking a particular action align with their own values, goals, and best interests. Advanced influencers also understand the power of strategic questioning. Instead of making statements that people can argue with, they ask questions that guide people to reach conclusions on their own. Questions like, what do you think would happen if, or how would it feel to achieve, or what's prevented you from trying this before? These questions help people think through the implications of different choices without feeling pressured. Remember, the goal of ethical influence isn't to get people to do what you want. It's to help people make decisions that truly serve their best interests while also creating value for you. When influence is done correctly, everyone wins. Chapter 7. Mastering difficult conversations and conflict resolution. Most people avoid difficult conversations until problems become crises. They hope issues will resolve themselves. They worry about damaging relationships, or they simply don't know how to navigate emotionally charged discussions effectively. But avoiding difficult conversations doesn't make problems disappear. It makes them worse. The ability to have productive, difficult conversations is one of the most valuable skills you can develop.
It's what allows you to address problems before they escalate, set clear boundaries, negotiate effectively, and maintain healthy relationships even when facing disagreements. People who master this skill become the ones others turn to when situations become complex or emotionally charged. The biggest mistake most people make in difficult conversations is focusing on being right instead of being effective. They prepare their arguments, gather their evidence, and try to prove their point. But difficult conversations aren't debates to be won, they're problems to be solved collaboratively. The most successful difficult conversations start with the right intention. Before you even begin the conversation, get clear on what outcome you actually want. Do you want the other person to change their behavior? Do you want to understand their perspective? Do you want to find a mutually acceptable solution to a problem? Do you want to repair damage to the relationship? When you're clear on your intention, you can guide the conversation toward that outcome instead of getting sidetracked by emotions or side issues. You can also communicate your intention explicitly at the beginning of the conversation, which helps the other person understand your goals and reduces their defensiveness. Here's the framework that works consistently for difficult conversations. I call it the PEACE protocol. P stands for prepare. E stands for engage with empathy. A stands for acknowledge emotions. C stands for collaborate on solutions. E stands for establish next steps. Let's start with preparation. Most people either avoid preparing for difficult conversations or they prepare the wrong way. They rehearse their arguments and anticipate objections. Effective preparation focuses on understanding the other person's perspective and planning how to create a safe environment for honest discussion. Before the conversation, consider what the other person might be thinking and feeling. What pressures are they under? What concerns might they have? What would make this conversation feel threatening to them? What would make them more willing to engage openly? This preparation helps you approach the conversation with empathy rather than judgment. Also prepare your emotional state. Difficult conversations require you to be at your best emotionally. If you're angry, stressed, or defensive, you won't be able to facilitate a productive discussion. Use the emotional regulation techniques we discussed earlier to ensure you're calm and centered before you begin. The engagement phase is crucial for setting the right tone. Start with creating safety. Choose an appropriate setting where you won't be interrupted and where the other person will feel comfortable speaking honestly. Begin with your intention rather than your concerns. Instead of, "We need to talk about your performance," try, "I'd like to have a conversation about how we can help you be even more successful in your role." Use what I call the soft start technique. Begin with something positive or acknowledging before addressing the difficult topic. This isn't manipulation, it's creating an emotional context that makes honest discussion more likely. I really value our working relationship, which is why I want to address something that's been concerning me. Acknowledging emotions is often the phase people skip, but it's essential for productive dialogue. When emotions are high, people can't think clearly or collaborate effectively. You need to address the emotional undercurrents before you can make progress on the practical issues. This means acknowledging both your own emotions and the other person's emotions. "I'm feeling frustrated about this situation, and I imagine you might be feeling frustrated too." Or, "This seems like a difficult topic for both of us." When emotions are acknowledged, they lose some of their power to derail the conversation. Listen for the emotions behind the other person's words. If they say, "I can't believe you didn't tell me about this earlier," they might be feeling excluded or disrespected. If they say, "I don't have time for this," they might be feeling overwhelmed. Address the emotional need, not just the surface statement. The collaboration phase is where real progress happens. This is where you move from discussing the problem to finding solutions. But collaboration requires genuine openness to solutions you haven't already decided on.
If you've already determined what the other person needs to do, you're not collaborating, you're dictating. Ask open-ended questions that invite creative thinking. What ideas do you have for addressing this? Or what would need to change for this to work better? Or how can we prevent this kind of situation in the future? These questions engage the other person as a partner in problem solving rather than a defendant in a trial. Be willing to compromise and find creative third options.
The best solutions to difficult situations often aren't what either person initially wanted. They're new possibilities that emerge when two people genuinely collaborate to solve a shared problem. Establishing next steps ensures that your difficult conversation leads to real change rather than just temporary relief. Be specific about what will happen next, who will do what, and when you'll follow up. So, we're agreeing that you'll speak with your team about the new deadlines by Friday, and we'll check in next Monday to see how it went. Also agree on how you'll communicate about this issue going forward. If similar situations arise, let's both commit to addressing them quickly rather than letting them build up. This prevents the same problems from recurring throughout the entire conversation. Maintain what I call compassionate directness. Be clear and honest about problems and expectations, but communicate with respect and care for the other person's dignity. You can be firm about standards and boundaries while still treating others as human beings with feelings and perspectives. Remember that difficult conversations are skills that improve with practice. The more you're willing to address issues directly and respectfully, the better you'll become at navigating these situations. And the better you become at difficult conversations, the fewer truly difficult conversations you'll need to have because you'll address issues before they become major problems. Chapter 8. Building your social network like a strategic asset. Your network isn't just a collection of contacts. It's a strategic asset that can accelerate your career, open doors to opportunities, provide valuable insights, and offer support during challenging times. But most people approach networking completely wrong. They focus on collecting business cards and LinkedIn connections instead of building genuine relationships with mutual value. The difference between networking and relationship building is the difference between transactional interactions and meaningful connections. Networkers ask, "What can this person do for me?" Relationship builders ask, "How can I add value to this person's life?" This mindset shift changes everything about how you approach professional and personal connections. Here's the truth that 99% of people don't understand about building valuable relationships. The best networking happens when you're not actively networking. It happens when you're genuinely interested in other people, when you're consistently helpful, and when you're known for being someone who connects others and shares valuable resources. The foundation of strategic relationship building is what I call the value-first approach. Instead of starting relationships by asking for help, advice, or opportunities, you start by offering something valuable. This might be industry insights, introductions to relevant people, helpful resources, or simply genuine interest in their work and challenges. But here's the key. The value you offer must be relevant and useful to them, not just what you think should be valuable. This requires you to understand their goals, challenges, and interests before you can identify how to help them. Most people skip this step and offer generic help that isn't actually helpful. To understand how you can add value to someone's life, you need to become genuinely curious about their world. What industry are they in? What role do they play? What challenges are they facing? What goals are they working toward? What interests them outside of work? The more you understand their context, the more precisely you can offer relevant value. There are several categories of value you can provide to others. Information value includes industry insights, market trends, research findings, or advance notice about relevant opportunities. Connection value means introducing them to people who could be helpful for their goals. Resource value involves sharing tools, templates, articles, or other materials that solve their problems. Support value means being someone they can talk through challenges with or who celebrates their successes. The most valuable category is opportunity value, which means alerting them to opportunities that align with their goals. This might be job openings, speaking opportunities, potential partnerships, or investment possibilities. People remember those who help them discover opportunities they wouldn't have found otherwise. Strategic relationship building also requires consistency over time. Strong relationships aren't built through single interactions. They develop through repeated positive touchpoints that demonstrate ongoing interest and care. This means staying in touch regularly, following up on previous conversations, and continuing to offer value over months and years. But staying in touch doesn't mean sending generic checking-in messages. Effective relationship maintenance involves sharing something specifically relevant to them or referencing something from your previous interactions. I saw this article about changes in your industry and thought you might find it interesting. Or, where did that project launch go that you mentioned last month? The key is developing systems for relationship maintenance rather than relying on memory or sporadic impulses. Some people use CRM systems to track their important relationships and schedule regular follow-ups. Others use calendar reminders or simple spreadsheets. The specific system matters less than having a system that ensures you don't lose touch with valuable relationships. Quality matters more than quantity in relationship building. It's better to have strong relationships with 50 people than superficial connections with 500. Strong relationships are built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and genuine care for each other's success. These are the relationships that lead to real opportunities and meaningful support. To build deeper relationships, you need to move beyond professional interactions to personal connection. This doesn't mean becoming best friends with everyone in your network, but it does mean showing interest in them as complete human beings rather than just professional roles. Learn about their interests outside work. Remember details about their families. Celebrate their personal achievements. The most strategic relationship builders also understand the power of introducing others. When you introduce two people who can benefit from knowing each other, you add value to both relationships simultaneously. You become known as someone who creates opportunities for others, which makes people want to include you in their networks. Be thoughtful about the introductions you make. Don't just connect anyone to everyone. Consider whether the introduction would be genuinely valuable to both parties. Provide context about why you think they should know each other. Follow up to see if the introduction was helpful.
Quality introductions build your reputation as someone with excellent judgment about people and opportunities. Another advanced strategy is building relationships with connectors. Every industry and community has certain people who seem to know everyone and who are generous about making introductions. Building strong relationships with these super connectors multiplies your access to broader networks. These are often people in roles like recruiting, consulting, investing, or organizing industry events. Geographic diversity in your network provides access to different opportunities and perspectives. While local relationships are important for immediate opportunities, relationships in other cities, regions, or countries can open doors that wouldn't exist otherwise. Technology makes it easier than ever to maintain relationships across distances. Also consider building relationships across different levels of seniority and experience. Relationships with peers provide mutual support and collaboration opportunities. Relationships with more senior people provide mentorship and access to higher-level opportunities. Relationships with more junior people provide fresh perspectives and future potential as they advance in their careers. Remember that relationship building is a long-term strategy, not a short-term tactic. The relationships you build today might not provide immediate benefits, but they compound in value over time. Someone who's a peer today might be in a position to hire you, invest in your company, or provide valuable partnerships years from now. The most important principle in strategic relationship building is authenticity. People can sense when interactions are purely transactional versus genuinely caring. The strongest professional relationships develop when people trust that you're interested in their success independent of what they can do for you. This authentic care for others creates the foundation for relationships that provide mutual value for decades. Chapter 9. The Psychology of Leadership and Inspiring Others. Leadership isn't about titles, positions, or authority. It's about the ability to inspire others to achieve goals they couldn't accomplish on their own. The most effective leaders understand that leadership is fundamentally about human psychology and emotional intelligence rather than just strategic planning and execution. Here's what separates true leaders from people who simply hold leadership positions. True leaders make others better. They don't just tell people what to do, they inspire people to want to do it. They don't just manage performance, they develop potential. They don't just achieve results, they build capabilities in others that last beyond any single project or role. The foundation of inspirational leadership is what psychologists call transformational leadership. Transformational leaders help others see beyond their current limitations and inspire them to achieve more than they thought possible. They do this through 4 key behaviors: idealized influence,
inspirational motivation, intellectual stimulation, and individualized consideration. Idealized influence means being the kind of person others want to follow. This isn't about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about demonstrating integrity, authenticity, and genuine care for others' success. People follow leaders they trust and respect, and trust is built through consistent alignment between words and actions. To develop idealized influence, you must be ruthlessly honest with yourself about your own strengths and limitations. Acknowledge when you don't know something, ask for help when you need it, admit mistakes when you make them. This vulnerability doesn't undermine your leadership, it makes you more relatable and trustworthy. Inspirational motivation involves communicating a compelling vision of the future and helping others see how their work contributes to something meaningful. People need to understand not just what they're supposed to do, but why it matters. They need to see how their individual contributions fit into a larger purpose that they find personally motivating. Effective leaders don't just tell people about the vision, they help people co-create it. They ask questions like, what would success look like for this team? Or what impact do we want to have on our customers? When people participate in creating the vision, they become emotionally invested in achieving it. But vision alone isn't enough. You also need to connect the vision to individual values and motivations. Different people are motivated by different things. Some are driven by achievement and recognition. Others are motivated by learning and growth. Still others are inspired by service and contribution. Great leaders understand what drives each person and help them see how the team's goals align with their personal motivations. Intellectual stimulation means challenging others to think differently and approach problems from new perspectives. This involves asking probing questions, encouraging creative solutions, and creating an environment where people feel safe to suggest unconventional ideas. Many leaders discourage intellectual stimulation because they want compliance, not creativity. But the best leaders know that breakthrough results require breakthrough thinking. To provide intellectual stimulation, become comfortable with questions like, what if we tried the opposite approach? Or, what assumptions are we making that might not be true? Or, how would someone from outside our industry solve this problem? These questions push people beyond their default thinking patterns and open up new possibilities. Individualized consideration means treating each person as an individual with unique strengths, development needs, and motivations, rather than using a one-size-fits-all leadership approach. This requires you to understand each team member deeply enough to adapt your leadership style to what works best for them. Some people need detailed guidance and frequent check-ins. Others prefer broad direction and autonomy. Some respond well to public recognition, others prefer private acknowledgement. Some learn best through doing, others need to understand the theory before they can apply it effectively. Great leaders adjust their approach based on what each person needs to perform at their best. This doesn't mean being inconsistent or having different standards for different people. It means recognizing that different people need different types of support and communication to meet the same high standards. Your expectations for performance remain consistent, but your approach to helping people achieve those expectations varies. Another crucial aspect of leadership psychology is understanding how to influence without authority. Even when you have formal leadership positions, your ability to inspire others depends more on your personal influence than your positional power. And in many situations, you need to lead even when you don't have formal authority. Leading without authority requires you to influence through expertise, relationships, and value creation rather than position and title. You become someone others choose to follow because they trust your judgment, value your perspective, and believe you're committed to their success as well as the team's success. This type of leadership often involves what's called servant leadership,
where your primary focus is on serving others and helping them succeed rather than being served by them. Servant leaders ask, how can I help you be more successful, rather than how can you help me achieve my goals? This approach builds loyalty and commitment that goes far beyond what positional authority can create. Emotional contagion is another powerful leadership tool. Emotions are contagious, especially from leaders to followers. If you're enthusiastic, others become more enthusiastic. If you're calm under pressure, others feel more confident. If you're optimistic about possibilities, others become more willing to take on challenges. But emotional contagion works in both directions. If you're consistently stressed, anxious, or negative, those emotions spread throughout your team.
This is why emotional regulation isn't just a personal skill for leaders, it's a professional responsibility. Your emotional state affects everyone around you. The most advanced leaders also understand how to create what psychologists call psychological safety. This means creating an environment where people feel safe to take risks, make mistakes, ask questions, and suggest ideas without fear of punishment or humiliation. When psychological safety is high, teams perform better because people bring their full creativity and intelligence to their work. Creating psychological safety requires you to model the behaviors you want to see. Admit when you don't know something. Ask for feedback about your own performance. Acknowledge when someone else's idea is better than yours. Respond to mistakes with curiosity rather than judgment. Ask, what can we learn from this, instead of who's responsible for this? Remember that leadership development is an ongoing process, not a destination. The most effective leaders are constantly learning, adapting, and improving their ability to inspire others. They seek feedback actively, reflect on their experiences regularly, and invest in developing their emotional intelligence and interpersonal skills continuously. Leadership is ultimately about creating positive change through other people. When you master the psychology of leadership, you don't just achieve better results, you develop others' capabilities and create lasting positive impact that extends far beyond any individual project or goal. Chapter 10. Defending against manipulation and emotional attacks. While developing emotional intelligence helps you influence others ethically, it also makes you a target for people who use emotional manipulation and psychological tactics for their own benefit. Learning to recognize and defend against these tactics isn't just about protecting yourself. It's about maintaining your integrity and keeping your relationships healthy. Emotional manipulators use sophisticated psychological techniques to control others' emotions, decisions, and behaviors. They exploit human psychology for personal gain, often leaving their targets feeling confused, guilty, or emotionally drained. But when you understand these tactics, you can recognize them quickly and respond effectively. The first category of manipulation is guilt-based manipulation. Manipulators use guilt to make you feel responsible for their emotions or circumstances, then leverage that guilt to get what they want. They might say things like, "After everything I've done for you," or "If you really cared about me, you would," or "I guess I'm just not as important to you as I thought." Healthy people express their needs directly. Manipulators make you feel bad for not anticipating their needs or for having different priorities. They frame their requests as tests of your loyalty, care, or commitment rather than simple preferences or needs. To defend against guilt-based manipulation, remember that you're not responsible for managing other people's emotions. You can care about someone without being responsible for their emotional state. When someone tries to make you feel guilty, ask yourself, is this person expressing a legitimate need, or are they trying to control my behavior through guilt? A simple response to guilt-based manipulation is acknowledgement without acceptance. I understand you're disappointed and I care about you. Here's what I'm able to do in this situation. This validates their feelings without accepting responsibility for causing or fixing them. The second category is fear-based manipulation. This involves creating anxiety or insecurity to motivate compliance. Manipulators might threaten to withdraw their support, end the relationship, or create negative consequences if you don't comply with their demands. They might also create artificial urgency to prevent you from thinking clearly about decisions. Fear-based manipulators often use phrases like, "If you don't do this, then," or "You have to decide right now," or "Everyone else is already doing this." They want you to make decisions based on anxiety rather than careful consideration of your best interests. To defend against fear-based manipulation, slow down the decision-making process. Real urgent decisions are rare. Most situations that feel urgent are artificially created to prevent you from thinking clearly. Say something like, "I need to think about this and get back to you tomorrow." If it's truly urgent, they'll explain why. If it's manipulation, they'll often become more aggressive or try different tactics. The third category is information manipulation. This involves controlling what information you have access to or distorting information to support their agenda. Information manipulators might withhold relevant details, present selective facts, or frame information in misleading ways. They might also use what's called gaslighting, where they make you question your own memory, perception, or judgment. They might deny saying things you clearly remember, claim events happen differently than you experience them, or suggest that your emotional responses are inappropriate or unreasonable. To defend against information manipulation, document important conversations and decisions. Keep records of what was agreed to and when. Trust your own memory and perceptions, especially when someone consistently tells you that your recollection is wrong. Seek outside perspectives when you feel confused about what's actually happening in a situation. Another common manipulation tactic is called love bombing, followed by withdrawal. This involves showering you with excessive attention, compliments, and affection early in a relationship, then gradually withdrawing that positive attention to keep you seeking their approval. This creates an addictive cycle where you keep trying to recreate the initial positive experience. Healthy relationships develop consistent patterns of mutual respect and care over time. Manipulative relationships are characterized by extreme highs and lows, where you never know which version of the person you're going to encounter. To recognize this pattern, pay attention to consistency over time rather than peak experiences. Someone who is genuinely caring will show that care consistently, not just when they want something from you or when you're behaving in ways they prefer. Projection is another manipulation tactic, where someone accuses you of behaviors they possess. They accuse you of being dishonest when they're lying. They accuse you of being manipulative when they're the ones manipulating you. This makes you feel defensive and shifts the focus from their issues. To defend against projection, recognize when someone is accusing you of something that is true about them. Don't internalize false accusations, but rather see them as a reflection of their internal state. A simple response to projection is, "I see this differently, and I'm not going to engage in this argument." When you recognize these manipulation tactics, you can respond calmly without getting hooked into it. Remember that you are not responsible for managing other people's emotions or demands. You have the right to set boundaries, to take time to make decisions, and to trust your own perceptions. Defending against manipulation isn't just about protecting yourself, it's about maintaining your integrity and keeping your relationships healthy.
Motivations or feelings that they're actually exhibiting themselves. Someone who lies frequently might accuse you of being dishonest. Someone who's being manipulative might claim that you're trying to manipulate them. When someone makes accusations that don't align with your experience of yourself, consider whether they might be projecting their own behavior onto you. This doesn't mean dismissing all criticism, but it does mean evaluating accusations critically rather than automatically accepting them. The most sophisticated manipulators use what's called intermittent reinforcement. This means providing positive responses unpredictably rather than consistently. Psychologically, this creates stronger attachment than consistent positive reinforcement, because you never know when you'll receive approval, so you keep trying harder to earn it. If you find yourself constantly working to earn someone's approval or trying to figure out what will make them happy with you, you might be experiencing intermittent reinforcement. Healthy relationships don't require you to constantly prove your worth or walk on eggshells to maintain the other person's positive regard. To defend against manipulation, generally trust your instincts. When something feels off in a relationship, if you consistently feel confused, drained, guilty, or anxious after interacting with someone, pay attention to those feelings. Your emotional response is often the first indicator that something unhealthy is happening. Also, maintain strong boundaries about what behavior you will and won't accept. Manipulators test boundaries gradually, pushing a little further each time to see what they can get away with. When you enforce boundaries consistently from the beginning, you prevent manipulation from escalating. Develop a support network of people who know you well and whose judgment you trust. When you're being manipulated, outside perspective can be invaluable for helping you see the situation clearly. Manipulators often try to isolate their targets from outside support, so maintaining these relationships is both protective and healing. Remember that defending against manipulation isn't about becoming suspicious of everyone or cynical about relationships. It's about maintaining healthy boundaries while still being open to genuine connection with others. The goal is to protect yourself from exploitation while remaining capable of authentic relationships with people who treat you with respect and care. When you combine emotional intelligence with strong boundaries and manipulation awareness, you become someone who can connect deeply with others while protecting yourself from those who would exploit your openness.
This balance allows you to be both emotionally intelligent and emotionally safe. Chapter 11. Advanced Emotional Calibration and Micro-Reading. Most people miss 90% of the emotional information available to them because they only notice obvious emotional displays. But the real masters of emotional intelligence can detect subtle shifts in mood, energy, and intention that others completely overlook. This advanced skill is called emotional calibration, and it's what separates those who can influence at the highest levels from those who remain oblivious to the emotional undercurrents that drive human behavior. Emotional calibration goes far beyond reading basic facial expressions or body language. It's about detecting micro shifts in vocal tone, noticing changes in breathing patterns, picking up on energy shifts in a room, and sensing when someone's internal state doesn't match their outward presentation. When you develop this level of sensitivity, you can respond to people's actual emotional needs rather than just what they're consciously expressing. The foundation of advanced calibration is understanding that emotions leak through multiple channels simultaneously. While someone might control their facial expression, their voice might reveal stress. While they maintain confident posture, their breathing might indicate anxiety. While their words sound enthusiastic, their energy might feel flat. Master calibrators learn to read all these channels simultaneously and notice when they're incongruent. Let's start with advanced vocal calibration. Most people listen to what's being said, but emotionally intelligent people listen to how it's being said. Voice carries emotional state in ways that words cannot hide. When someone is genuinely excited, their voice has natural variability, energy, and resonance. When someone is faking excitement, their voice often sounds forced with artificial inflections and inconsistent energy. Listen for micro-hesitations that indicate uncertainty or internal conflict. Pay attention to slight changes in pitch that suggest emotional shifts. Notice when someone's vocal energy doesn't match the content of what they're saying. These incongruencies reveal the difference between what someone is thinking and what they're actually feeling. Breathing patterns provide another rich source of emotional information. When people are relaxed and confident, their breathing is typically deeper and more regular. When they're anxious or stressed, their breathing becomes shallower and more rapid. When they're angry or frustrated, their breathing often becomes more controlled and deliberate. You can often see these breathing changes in someone's shoulders or chest movement, even when they're trying to appear calm. Energy calibration is perhaps the most advanced skill in emotional intelligence. This involves sensing the overall emotional atmosphere that someone creates around them. Some people radiate calm confidence that makes others feel secure. Others project anxiety that makes everyone around them feel unsettled. Still others emanate enthusiasm that energizes entire groups. To develop energy calibration, start paying attention to how you feel when you're around different people. Do you feel more energized or drained, more confident or more uncertain, more optimistic or more pessimistic? Your emotional response to others often reflects the energy they're unconsciously projecting. Advanced calibrators also notice group emotional dynamics. They can sense when a meeting has positive momentum versus when energy is flagging. They notice when someone in a group is silently disagreeing even if they haven't spoken up. They can tell when apparent consensus is actually just compliance masquerading as agreement. Context calibration involves understanding how someone's emotional baseline changes in different situations. The same person might be naturally animated in casual conversations, but more reserved in formal meetings. They might be confident when discussing their expertise, but uncertain when addressing unfamiliar topics. True calibration means understanding these contextual variations rather than assuming everyone has the same emotional patterns across all situations. One of the most valuable calibration skills is detecting incongruency between someone's conscious presentation and their unconscious emotional state. This might show up as someone who says they're fine, but whose body language suggests otherwise, or someone who claims to be enthusiastic about a project, but their energy doesn't match their words. These incongruencies reveal the difference between what someone is thinking and what they're actually feeling.
Resist the temptation to immediately point it out. Instead, create space for the person to express what they're actually feeling. You might ask open-ended questions like, "How are you really feeling about this?" Or, "What concerns might you have that we haven't discussed?" This gives them permission to share their authentic emotional state, rather than maintaining their social facade.
Advanced calibration also involves understanding emotional recovery patterns. Different people process and recover from emotional stress in different ways. Some need to talk through their feelings immediately. Others need time alone to process before they can discuss what happened. Some recover quickly from setbacks, while others need more time and support. When you understand these individual patterns, you can provide the right kind of support at the right time. The key to developing calibration skills is deliberate practice with feedback. Start by making predictions about people's emotional states and then checking your accuracy through conversation or observation. Notice what cues you picked up on and which ones you missed. Over time, you'll develop more sophisticated pattern recognition for reading emotional information. Remember that calibration should always be used ethically to better understand and serve others, never to manipulate or take advantage. When you can accurately read people's emotional states, you can respond more appropriately to their needs, communicate in ways that resonate with them, and create interactions that feel supportive and understanding, rather than superficial or transactional. Chapter 12. Mastering Emotional Contagion and Influence. Emotions are contagious. This isn't just a metaphor, it's a biological reality. When you're around someone who's enthusiastic, you tend to feel more enthusiastic. When you're near someone who's anxious, you often start feeling anxious yourself. When you interact with someone who's calm and confident, you typically feel more centered. This phenomenon is called emotional contagion, and understanding how to leverage it ethically is one of the most powerful skills you can develop. Most people are unconscious victims of emotional contagion. They absorb whatever emotions are prevalent in their environment without realizing what's happening. They walk into a room full of stressed people and wonder why they suddenly feel overwhelmed. They spend time with negative people and can't figure out why their mood is shifted. They're emotional sponges, soaking up whatever energy surrounds them. But emotionally intelligent people understand how to consciously manage emotional contagion in both directions. They can protect themselves from absorbing negative emotions while intentionally spreading positive emotional states. They become emotional leaders who elevate the energy of every room they enter, rather than being dragged down by whatever mood happens to be present. The science behind emotional contagion involves mirror neurons, which automatically fire when we observe others' emotions, essentially making us feel a diluted version of what they're experiencing. This happens below the level of conscious awareness and much faster than rational thought. By the time you consciously recognize someone else's emotional state, you've already begun to experience it yourself. This is why the emotional state you bring to interactions matters so much. If you're genuinely enthusiastic, others will begin to feel more enthusiastic. If you're authentically calm under pressure, others will feel more centered. If you're genuinely curious and engaged, others will become more open and creative. Your emotional state becomes the foundation for the emotional tone of the entire interaction. But here's the crucial distinction. Authentic emotions are contagious, while fake emotions typically aren't. People can unconsciously sense when emotions are genuine versus performed. If you try to fake enthusiasm or confidence, others will pick up on the incongruence and may actually feel more suspicious or uncomfortable rather than being positively influenced. To leverage positive emotional contagion, you must first master your own emotional state. This means developing the ability to generate authentic, positive emotions, even in challenging circumstances. It's not about pretending everything is perfect when it's not. It's about finding genuine reasons to feel optimistic, curious, or engaged, regardless of the immediate situation. One technique for generating authentic, positive emotions is called purposeful reframing. Instead of just trying to think positive thoughts, connect your current situation to something you genuinely care about. If you're facing a difficult conversation, reframe it as an opportunity to strengthen the relationship. If you're dealing with a challenging project, see it as a chance to develop new skills. When the reframe connects to something you truly value, the resulting positive emotions will be authentic and contagious. Another powerful technique is embodied emotion generation. Your physical state influences your emotional state, and others pick up on both. If you want to feel and project confidence, adopt confident posture, breathe deeply, and move with deliberate purpose. If you want to create a sense of calm engagement, relax your facial muscles, maintain steady eye contact, and speak in measured tones. The physical changes will generate authentic emotional shifts that others will unconsciously mirror. Energy management is crucial for sustained emotional leadership. You can't consistently project positive emotions if you're emotionally depleted. This means taking care of your physical health, managing your stress levels, maintaining activities that energize you, and setting boundaries that prevent emotional burnout. Think of yourself as an emotional athlete who needs to maintain peak condition to perform effectively. Advanced emotional contagion also involves understanding group emotional dynamics. When you enter a group, there's typically a prevailing emotional tone that everyone is unconsciously matching. Sometimes this tone serves the group's objectives, but often it doesn't. A team might be stuck in frustration when they need creativity. A meeting might be dominated by anxiety when calm analysis would be more productive. A negotiation might be tense when collaborative energy would create better outcomes. Skilled emotional leaders can shift group energy by consciously introducing a different emotional tone. This doesn't mean being inappropriately cheerful during serious discussions or artificially enthusiastic about bad news. It means bringing the emotional energy that the situation actually requires for optimal outcomes. If a group is stuck in analysis paralysis, you might introduce decisive energy by asking action-oriented questions and speaking with conviction. If a team is rushing toward a poor decision, you might slow things down by demonstrating thoughtful reflection and asking everyone to consider long-term implications.
If people are becoming defensive during conflict, you might shift toward collaborative energy by acknowledging everyone's valid concerns and focusing on shared objectives. The key to ethical emotional influence is ensuring that the emotions you're spreading actually serve everyone involved. You're not trying to manipulate people into feeling things that benefit only you. You're creating emotional conditions that help everyone think more clearly, perform more effectively, and achieve better outcomes. Emotional contagion also works through storytelling and metaphor. When you tell stories that evoke specific emotions, listeners often begin to feel those emotions themselves. If you tell stories of overcoming obstacles, others feel more resilient. If you share examples of creative breakthroughs, others feel more innovative. If you describe moments of collaboration and trust, others become more willing to cooperate. Remember that emotional leadership is a responsibility as much as it is a skill. When people are influenced by your emotional state, you have an obligation to ensure that influence serves their highest good as well as your own objectives. Use emotional contagion to elevate others, not to control or exploit them. Emotional resilience isn't about being invulnerable to setbacks or immune to stress. It's about developing the ability to recover quickly from emotional challenges, learn from difficult experiences, and maintain your effectiveness even when facing adversity. In a world where change is constant and pressure is inevitable, emotional resilience is what separates those who thrive from those who merely survive. Most people think resilience is either something you're born with or something that develops automatically through experiencing hardship. But neither of these beliefs is accurate. Resilience is a specific set of skills and mental habits that can be developed systematically. The most emotionally resilient people have learned to interpret challenges differently, manage their recovery processes more effectively, and use setbacks as opportunities for growth rather than evidence of inadequacy. The foundation of emotional resilience is what psychologists call cognitive flexibility. This means having multiple ways to interpret any situation rather than being locked into one perspective that might generate hopelessness or victimization. When resilient people face setbacks, they automatically ask questions like, "What can I learn from this?" and "How can this experience make me stronger?" rather than, "Why does this always happen to me?" or "What's wrong with me?" But cognitive flexibility goes deeper than just positive thinking. It's about developing what I call the observer self, a part of your consciousness that can step back and watch your emotional reactions without being completely controlled by them. When you're triggered, angry, disappointed, or overwhelmed, the observer self can notice these emotions without being consumed by them. This creates space for choice rather than automatic reaction. Developing the observer self requires regular practice with mindfulness and self-reflection.
Throughout your day, pause periodically to notice what you're feeling without immediately trying to change it. Ask yourself questions like, what emotion am I experiencing right now? And what thoughts are creating this emotional state? This practice strengthens your ability to maintain perspective even during emotionally intense situations. Another crucial component of resilience is what I call emotional recovery protocols. Just as athletes have specific recovery routines after intense training, emotionally resilient people have systematic approaches for returning to baseline after emotional stress. These might include physical activities that discharge stress, reflection practices that help process experiences, or social connections that provide support and perspective. The key is having multiple recovery strategies rather than relying on a single approach. Some situations might call for physical movement to work through stress. Others might require solitary reflection to make sense of what happened. Still others might need social support to gain different perspectives. Resilient people match their recovery approach to the specific type of emotional stress they're experiencing. Resilience also requires what psychologists call anti-fragility, a concept developed by Nassim Taleb. Anti-fragile systems don't just recover from stress, they become stronger because of it. Anti-fragile people approach challenges with the assumption that they will emerge more capable than before, not just return to their previous level of functioning. To develop anti-fragility, start viewing every challenge as training for future challenges.
Ask yourself after difficult experiences, what capabilities have I developed that I didn't have before? And how has this experience prepared me for future situations? This reframing transforms setbacks from evidence of weakness into proof of growing strength. Another crucial element of resilience is maintaining a sense of purpose and meaning even during difficult periods. When people have a clear sense of why their efforts matter, they can endure temporary discomfort more easily. Purpose provides the motivation to persist when immediate circumstances are unpleasant or discouraging. Your sense of purpose doesn't have to be grandiose or world-changing. It just needs to be genuinely meaningful to you. Maybe you're committed to providing for your family, developing your skills, contributing to your community, or creating something valuable. When you connect daily challenges to these larger purposes, you can maintain resilience even when specific situations feel overwhelming. Resilience also involves developing emotional granularity about your recovery process. Instead of just knowing that you're stressed or upset, resilient people can identify specifically what type of emotional stress they're experiencing and what type of recovery they need. Disappointment requires different recovery than anger. Anxiety needs different support than sadness. Frustration calls for different strategies than overwhelm. The more precisely you can identify your emotional needs, the more effectively you can address them. This prevents the common mistake of trying to solve the wrong problem or using recovery strategies that don't match your actual emotional state. Remember that resilience is not about becoming emotionally numb or pretending that difficulties don't affect you. It's about developing the skills to navigate challenges effectively while maintaining your emotional intelligence and connection to others. The goal is to become someone who can face whatever life brings while continuing to grow, contribute, and maintain meaningful relationships. Chapter 14. Creating psychological safety and trust in any environment. Psychological safety is the foundation upon which all other emotional intelligence skills are built. It's the feeling that you can express yourself authentically, take risks, make mistakes, ask questions, and share ideas without fear of punishment, humiliation, or rejection. When psychological safety is present, people bring their full intelligence and creativity to their interactions. When it's absent, people become defensive, guarded, and focused on self-protection rather than collaboration. Here's what most people don't understand about psychological safety. It's not about being nice or avoiding difficult conversations. It's about creating an environment where truth can be spoken, problems can be addressed, and growth can happen. In psychologically safe environments, people have challenging conversations more easily because they trust that everyone's intention is mutual success rather than personal domination.
The most psychologically safe environments are often those with the highest standards and expectations, because people know that the goal is excellence, not perfection, and that mistakes are treated as learning opportunities rather than personal failures. Low psychological safety environments, by contrast, often have lower actual performance because people spend their energy managing their image rather than focusing on results. Creating psychological safety starts with your own behavior and mindset. You cannot create safety for others if you're operating from a place of defensiveness, judgment, or the need to be right. Psychological safety begins with leaders and influential people who model the behavior they want to see from others. The first element of creating psychological safety is demonstrating intellectual humility. This means being genuinely curious about other perspectives, acknowledging when you don't know something, and being willing to change your mind when presented with better information. When people see that you're more committed to finding the truth than to being right, they feel safer sharing their honest thoughts and observations. Intellectual humility shows up in your language patterns. Instead of saying, "That's wrong," try, "Help me understand your thinking on that." Instead of, "Obviously the answer is," try, "One way to look at this might be." Instead of defending your initial position when challenged, try, "That's an interesting point. Let me think about that." The second element is responding to mistakes and failures with curiosity rather than judgment. When someone makes an error, the first question should be, "What can we learn from this?" rather than "Who's responsible for this?" When people know that mistakes will be treated as learning opportunities rather than reasons for punishment, they're more likely to take appropriate risks and more likely to admit errors quickly rather than hiding them. This doesn't mean eliminating accountability or accepting poor performance. It means separating the person from the problem and focusing on solutions rather than blame. You can have high standards while still maintaining psychological safety by making it clear that everyone is working together to achieve those standards rather than competing against each other to avoid punishment. The third element is actively inviting input and dissent. Psychological safety isn't just the absence of punishment for speaking up, it's the active encouragement of diverse perspectives. This means regularly asking questions like, "What are we missing?" and "What concerns do you have that we haven't discussed?" and "What would need to be different for this to work better?" When you actively invite dissent, you need to be prepared to receive it non-defensively. If someone shares a concern and your first response is to explain why they're wrong, you've just reduced psychological safety for everyone who witnessed that interaction. Instead, thank them for sharing their perspective and ask follow-up questions to better understand their viewpoint. The fourth element is being transparent about your own uncertainties and learning process. When you share your thinking process, including what you're unsure about and what you're still trying to figure out, you give others permission to do the same. This creates a culture of mutual learning rather than a culture of expertise performance. You might say things like, "I'm still thinking through this decision and here are the factors I'm considering," or "I tried this approach last time and it didn't work as well as I hoped, so I'm experimenting with a different strategy." This transparency helps others feel safe to share their own uncertainties and learning process. Creating psychological safety also requires paying attention to group dynamics and intervening when necessary. If one person consistently dominates conversations, others won't feel safe to contribute. If certain people's ideas are consistently dismissed or ignored, those people will stop sharing. If discussions become personal attacks rather than problem-solving conversations, everyone will become defensive.
Part of creating safety is ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to contribute and that all contributions are treated with respect, even when they're not ultimately adopted. This might mean directly asking quieter people for their input, redirecting conversations when they become unproductive, or privately coaching individuals whose behavior is reducing safety for others. Different people feel safe in different ways, so creating psychological safety requires understanding individual differences. Some people feel safer when they have time to think before sharing their thoughts. Others prefer to process ideas out loud in real time. Some need to understand the big picture before engaging with details. Others prefer to start with specifics and build toward broader concepts. The most psychologically safe environments accommodate these different styles, rather than requiring everyone to adapt to one preferred approach. This might mean providing agenda items in advance for people who need processing time, or creating opportunities for both verbal and written input, or varying the format of discussions to include different participation styles. Psychological safety also requires consistency over time. People need to know that the rules of engagement won't change based on your mood, the pressure you're under, or the specific situation you're facing. If someone takes a risk to share honest feedback and is punished for it, that single incident can destroy months of safety-building efforts. This means being especially mindful of your reactions when you're stressed, disappointed, or facing pressure. These are the moments when it's most tempting to revert to defensive or controlling behavior, but they're also the moments when maintaining safety is most crucial for long-term trust and effectiveness. Remember that psychological safety is not just a nice-to-have for better relationships, it's a competitive advantage that leads to better decision-making, more innovation, faster problem-solving, and higher performance. When people feel safe to bring their full intelligence and creativity to their work and relationships, everyone benefits from the elevated level of engagement and contribution. Chapter 15. Your 90-Day Emotional Intelligence Transformation Plan. Knowledge without application is worthless. You can understand every principle of emotional intelligence perfectly, but if you don't implement what you've learned consistently, nothing in your life will change. This final chapter is your roadmap for transforming knowledge into skill, theory into practice, and understanding into real-world results. The next 90 days will determine whether you join the 1% who actually develop emotional intelligence or remain among the 99% who consume information but never apply it. The difference isn't intelligence, willpower, or natural talent. The difference is having a systematic approach to skill development and the commitment to follow through consistently. Here's your 90-day transformation, broken into 3 30-day phases, each building on the previous phase and progressively developing more advanced skills. This isn't about perfection, it's about consistent practice that compounds over time to create dramatic improvement in your emotional intelligence and social effectiveness. Phase 1 focuses on self-awareness and self-regulation, the foundation skills that make everything else possible. You cannot manage what you're not aware of, and you cannot influence others effectively if you're not managing your own emotional state skillfully. Days 1 to 10 are dedicated to developing emotional self-awareness through systematic self-observation. Set hourly alarms on your phone, and when they ring, pause for 30 seconds to identify your current emotional state, energy level, and any physical tension you're carrying. Don't judge what you find, just observe it. Write brief notes about patterns you notice. This trains your brain to maintain ongoing awareness of your internal experience. Days 11 to 20 focus on identifying your emotional triggers and default response patterns. Keep a trigger journal where you note every time you have a strong emotional reaction. Record what happened immediately before the reaction, who was involved, what you were thinking, and how you responded. Look for patterns. Maybe you always get defensive when someone questions your expertise. Maybe you shut down when facing criticism. Maybe you become aggressive when feeling cornered. Days 21 to 30 introduce basic emotional regulation techniques. Practice the physiological reset method whenever you notice early warning signals of emotional reactivity. Use the 4-4 count breathing technique and muscle relaxation to interrupt stress responses before they escalate. Begin implementing the STOP protocol when facing emotional triggers. Start building the pause between stimulus and response. Phase 2 develops your ability to read and respond to others' emotions effectively, building the empathy and social skills that allow you to connect with people authentically and influence them ethically. Days 31 to 40 focus on developing advanced observation skills. During every conversation, practice the facial scanning technique to notice micro-expressions and emotional incongruences. Pay attention to vocal patterns, body language changes, and energy shifts. Don't try to act on what you observe yet. Just build your pattern recognition abilities. Days 41 to 50 emphasize empathic responding and emotional validation. Practice reflecting back what you observe about others' emotional states without trying to fix or change their feelings. Use phrases like, "It sounds like you're feeling frustrated about this," or "I can see this is important to you."
focus on understanding rather than problem solving. Days 51 to 60 introduce strategic influence and persuasion techniques. Practice the 6 principles of ethical influence in your daily interactions. Look for opportunities to provide genuine value before asking for anything in return. Create appropriate social proof through stories and examples. Phase 3 integrates advanced emotional intelligence skills and develops your ability to lead emotional dynamics in groups and challenging situations. Days 61 to 70 focus on difficult conversation skills using the peace protocol. Identify one relationship or situation where you've been avoiding a necessary conversation. Plan and execute that conversation using the preparation, engagement, acknowledgement, collaboration, and establishment frameworks. Reflect on what worked and what you can improve. Days 71 to 80 develop your emotional leadership and contagion abilities. Practice consciously setting the emotional tone in meetings, conversations, and group settings. Work on generating authentic, positive emotions and spreading them to others through your energy, storytelling, and engagement style. Notice how your emotional state affects the people around you. Days 81 to 90 integrate all skills while building long-term emotional resilience and advanced calibration abilities. Practice the anti-fragility mindset by reframing challenges as growth opportunities. Develop your observer self through daily reflection. Create systems for maintaining emotional fitness over time. Throughout all 90 days, maintain 3 daily practices that support your emotional intelligence development.
First, spend 10 minutes each morning setting your emotional intention for the day. What emotional state do you want to maintain? What emotional challenges might you face? How do you want to respond to stress or conflict? Second, conduct a 10-minute evening review where you reflect on your emotional experiences from the day. What went well? What could you have handled better? What patterns are you noticing? What do you want to practice tomorrow? This reflection consolidates your learning and identifies areas for improvement. Third, maintain a weekly relationship review where you consider the quality of your most important relationships. How well are you reading and responding to the people who matter most? What emotional needs might they have that you're not addressing? How can you add more value to their lives? This ensures that your emotional intelligence development translates into stronger, more meaningful connections. The key to success with this plan is consistency rather than perfection. You will have days when you forget to practice, days when you handle situations poorly despite your best intentions, and days when you feel like you're not making progress. This is normal and expected. The people who succeed are those who return to practice after setbacks rather than those who never experience setbacks. Track your progress using specific, observable metrics rather than vague feelings. Count how many times per day you successfully use the pause between stimulus and response. Note how often people seem to open up and share more with you than usual. Observe how frequently others seek your input during conflicts or difficult decisions. These concrete indicators will show you that your skills are developing even when the progress feels invisible. Remember that emotional intelligence is not a destination, but a lifelong practice. These 90 days will give you the foundation and momentum, but the real benefits come from making these skills a permanent part of how you operate in the world. The investment you make in developing emotional intelligence will pay dividends in every relationship, every opportunity, and every challenge you face for the rest of your life. Your transformation starts now, not tomorrow, not next week, not when conditions are perfect, now. Because the person you become through developing emotional intelligence is the person who will create the life you actually want, rather than just the life you happen to.